And yes, it occurred.
Like we're on trees? Or?
Yeah, okay. So, because of supply chain bottlenecks. That's what I'm talking about. There was a labor
Policy
shortage
choices
because
were made.
of COVID.
Policy choices
and then there
were
was
made.
this thing called greedflation, which was called a left-wing conspiracy theory. But then we saw record returns for corporations.
Emma Vigeland joined Abby Phillip's CNN panel opposite Republican strategist Scott Jennings, and the contrast was immediate. One side came armed with substance, the other with talking points. Vigeland focused on policy and accountability, while Jennings relied on deflection and blame shifting. Let's dive into the clip and see how this exchange unfolded.
And if you have a problem with the economy, it's the other guy's fault, the last guy.
We inherited a mess, affordability, but you can call it affordability or anything you want, but the Democrats caused the affordability problem, and we're the ones that are fixing it.
Remember when Trump said this about his tariffs back in April?
Maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
Well, it is officially doll season, and a growing number of Americans are actually struggling right now in this economy. A new Fed survey found more Americans say that their finances are, quote, much worse now than they were a year ago. And they don't expect it to get any better in the next year either. Trump's approval rating on the economy has plummeted 15 points since he's taken office. And despite the president saying that the economy is great, he's now giving a $12 billion bailout to farmers who were hurt by his own tariffs. Justin Amash said this, a former GOP representative. He said, Trump swipes money from taxpayers to bail out the farmers who were harmed by the tariffs that Trump himself placed on American businesses and consumers. This is the Trump economy. Senator Flake.
Can't argue with that. On tariffs, tariffs are inflationary. That has been a GOP article of faith forever. And it's true. And we're finding that out. There's been some time to get there, but we're there, certainly. And I think that next year it'll even be worse unless there's some reversal on tariffs. We've seen bits and pieces shift, certain sectors exempt and certain countries exempt, but overall it's starting to bite. Consumers are paying more and they're feeling it. Yeah, and you can't tell them otherwise.
Well, yeah, and Trump is not only trying to tell them otherwise, but is also not acknowledging what his own actions are showing, which is that he's bailing out farmers, rolling back some tariffs on food items. Those seem to be clear acknowledgments that the tariff policy has hurt Americans.
Well, I think on the agriculture piece, there's a couple things going on. One, right up front, Trump said the tariffs were going to cause some short-term turbulence or pain for some sectors. He acknowledged it. Agriculture has felt that a little bit. The row crop guys especially, but of course they solved some of that with the deal they cut with China. So actually was in.
Did they solve that? Because I mean, I don't think we would.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we would be talking about a $12 billion bailout. Well, A, and B, the amount that China has bought is not anywhere near what has been promised.
Okay, so they cut a deal with China, and they're in better shape today than they were when we didn't have a deal with China. So that's number one. Number two, I was in Texas Saturday night with the Texas Farm Bureau, spoke to a lot of farmers down there. It was interesting. There were some people that absolutely had concerns. In fact, I talked to one guy who was going to the White House meeting today, and they were glad to get invited to that. I think they feel like what the president's doing on the ag thing is responsive to them. They have concerns, not just tariffs. They're a little worried about the Argentinian beef issue as well. They threw that out. So, yeah, I mean, he's got some issues to work out. But overall, if you look at the Fed survey, people are happy and excited about the job market and the labor market in the United States. That's a good thing. And if you talk to Scott Bessent, he'll tell you that they think in 2026, we're going to see a boom in jobs and growth in this country, thanks to some of the structural changes they made this year. So they're expressing optimism and exuding optimism, and that's what they got to do going into an election.
There have been more than 1 million jobs lost so far this year, a number that basically rivals the pandemic time. So there is a picture of the economy that we're not getting from the federal government numbers, because those numbers are by and large not coming out. But from private sector payrolls, jobs are being lost right now, right at this moment.
We've seen actually for the first time in years, actually job losses month after month, revisions showing private sector job losses. And I think that is driving a lot of anxiety. And it comes at a time where the facts are that the tariffs are causing middle-class families, working-class families, to pay more money. They're $1,700, estimated by the Yale Budget Lab, of how much families are paying more for the tariffs. And so I think what's really odd is that the president promised that inflation would come down on day one. He'd get rid of it. And instead, he went on this policy that I agree is just different from Republicans, what Republicans have supported for decades, which is raising prices on people. And of course, the whole issue with the bailout of the farmers is if we didn't have these actually counterproductive tariffs, you wouldn't have to take taxpayer money to actually bail them out, because China's response on the soybeans is because of the president's tariffs policy.
I know all of human history started in January of this year, but I could take you back 4 years when input prices for agriculture, from fuel to materials to you name it, went through the roof. I know you know a little something about it because you worked under Joe Biden when it all happened. So these farmers, they're in a 10-month period here with Trump, but they just came out of a 4-month period where they were dying under the inflationary and affordability crisis caused by Democrats. They support this president. They like what he did today, and they're going to give him a little latitude to get out of it.
I don't think that's accurate when you hear from farm bureaus.
You don't think it's accurate that inflation happened under Biden?
I'm sorry, Donald Trump talked about, we definitely had inflation, but Joe Biden didn't pass tariffs that actually, with his own policy, actually increased prices for people. And I think what's really stunning is that 1 year in, Donald Trump's approval on economics is actually now worse than Joe Biden's. So all you want to talk about Joe Biden, the fact is people hold Donald Trump responsible because it's his policies that are adding to the burden on families.
Scott Jennings perfectly embodies the kind of MAGA punditry that turns serious political discussions into endless loops of distraction. On Abby Phillip's panel, he repeatedly dragged past Democratic presidents into every point: Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and even Bill and Hillary Clinton, regardless of relevance. This constant whataboutism isn't just a debating tactic. It's a deliberate way to avoid accountability and shift attention from the policies and actions shaping Americans' lives today. The aim isn't clarity or understanding. It's spectacle, confusion, and keeping the audience chasing ghosts instead of facts. Emma Vigeland, by contrast, takes an entirely different approach. She comes armed with verifiable facts, data, and context, cutting through the noise to show the real-world consequences of policy decisions. Her focus is on outcomes that matter, how families, workers, and the broader economy are actually impacted, not on manufactured outrage or partisan posturing. Her method is precise, grounded, and audience-centered, giving viewers clear insight into what's really happening. The contrast between these two approaches couldn't be sharper. Jennings performs for the camera, relying on smirks, dramatic pauses, and pointed stares to project confidence, while Vigeland maintains calm authority, letting the evidence speak for itself. Watching her engage with these tactics highlights the critical role of reasoned, fact-based commentary in political discourse. This isn't just a moment of television theater. It's a study in how narratives are shaped, challenged, and either upheld or dismantled. Vigeland's presence reminds viewers that facts matter, that accountability matters, and that real progress depends on confronting reality rather than hiding behind theatrics. Watching the clip, it's impossible to miss why voices like hers are essential, especially when they face opposition intent on spinning feelings into arguments. This is the power of grounded analysis in a media landscape dominated by performance. It cuts through the noise, exposes inconsistencies, and leaves viewers informed rather than manipulated.
Joe Biden, David Axelrod writes, Donald Trump recaptured the White House in part by relentlessly exploiting Biden's failure to heed widespread concerns about the rising cost of living. And now, bizarrely, President Trump is walking himself and his party into the same perilous trap by denying the economic reality that working families are living. It's kind of hard to argue that when, in some ways, Trump is literally saying a lot of the same things, that people are just not feeling it. They're just not seeing how great it is, or that we just have to remind them that this is a PR problem and not an actual economic problem.
Well, Abby, I think we should put some of the president's comments into context. I think he is taking some of the celebrations on the prices that have come down, like we've talked about on your show before, prices on fuel, certain food items that are, in fact, coming down. And I think that Scott's absolutely right. We should celebrate the fact that Americans are looking at this this job market and saying we have a better chance at getting good, high-paying jobs and being able to support ourselves and our families. So, look, this is a reality that the American people are facing. The vice president came out and said, stick with us, give us some time, show a little grace on this issue. The president has said, hey, we're 11 months in.
Why should they show
I think, and I do think.
That's the part I don't understand.
Well, and I do think, Abby,
why should we show grace?
I honestly want to know.
We ask
I'm
for the same
curious.
grace.
We don't live in a snap election system.
As we suffered through 4 years, as I've said before, and I'll continue to say, as the worst inflation in my lifetime.
To your point,
many Americans' lifetime.
This is a president who came into office and he said, this is going to be my top priority. That you all are suffering under the inflation of the Joe Biden administration. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it on day one, he says. Why should then Americans, almost a year into this thing, turn around and say, well, you know, you've raised prices on us through tariffs, but we're going to just give you some grace? That doesn't make any practical sense, and it doesn't make any political sense.
Would it make any sense to go back to the people who caused it in the first place?
No, well, if you ask voters, it's funny that you should bring that up.
Oh, Scott got him there. I love that he laughs like, what a zinger this was. What a douche.
Scott, because if you ask voters, how much do you blame Trump for the current rate of inflation? 59% say a great deal, a good amount.
Well, he's the president. He is the head that wears the crown.
Exactly. He is the president.
But why go back to the people with the shovel digging the hole?
To note that the inflation that occurred under Biden was in part naturally occurring due to supply chain bottlenecks and because the COVID once-in-a-lifetime pandemic occurred. And yes, it occurred.
Like we're on trees?
Yeah, okay. So, because of supply chain bottlenecks. That's what I'm talking about. There was a labor shortage because of COVID.
Policy choices
and then there was this thing called greedflation, which was called a left-wing conspiracy theory. But then we saw record returns for corporations in their earnings, which showed that even though prices were going up, they were still taking home record returns, these corporations. And in part, the Biden administration tried to address that with Lina Khan and more enforcement. Now Trump's in office and there are no cops on the beat. We just hit a record of credit card debt in this country, over $1.2 trillion of credit card debt. We just hit a record in terms of subprime auto delinquencies, showing that people are really hurting. And there's something like the top 1% owns 50% of all stocks and trades. This is an income inequality problem as well as
Trump
a tariff
problem. Trump is also
problem.
blaming greedflation now for rising costs. And so, to your point, it was considered just sort of a Democratic talking point. Now Trump is doing the same thing. Again, you're seeing the same patterns playing out. And just for people at home who are just like, look, it's getting more expensive to live, they're not buying it. They weren't buying it with Joe Biden, and they're not buying it now.
The striking thing is, Republican tax and regulatory policy has been good for the economy. Even with that, you see huge inflation because of tariffs. But President Trump's signature economic policy was tariffs. I love tariffs. It's the most beautiful word in the dictionary. He goes on and on about it. And then when tariffs cause inflation, then he tries to say, no, they don't. But tax and regulatory policy has been favorable for business, but it's the uncertainty and the higher tariffs that are hurting the economy. And that's why the president is running away from it at certain times, or he'll exempt certain sectors or certain countries. But it's going to hurt coming into the elections, believe me, unless there's a reversal.
And he's hearing it from not just from voters, not just from Democrats, but also from Republicans in his own party as well.
One of the most revealing moments on Abby Phillip's CNN panel came when former Republican Senator Jeff Flake openly admitted that Trump's tariffs were not only harmful, but also entirely his responsibility. It's rare for Republicans in office, or even pundits aligned with MAGA, to publicly acknowledge these truths, making Flake's candor stand out as an exception in a media space dominated by deflection and spin. This admission sets the stage for a broader discussion about accountability, transparency, and the consequences of economic policy choices. Emma Vigeland once again demonstrated why progressive voices grounded in facts are indispensable. She arrived prepared with verifiable data, clear numbers, and a contextual understanding of how policy decisions affect working families, farmers, and the broader economy. She calmly presented reality as it exists, not as a narrative to protect a political brand. Every point she made was anchored in evidence, showing viewers the true cost of tariffs, the burden on middle-class families, and how decisions at the top trickle down to real-world consequences. Meanwhile, Scott Jennings embodied everything frustrating about MAGA media performance, from constant interruptions to smirks, exaggerated gestures, and those pointed looks directly into the camera. His style was all about optics and posturing. He talked over Vigeland repeatedly, prioritizing spectacle over substance, while she maintained composure, presenting facts clearly and without theatrics. The contrast couldn't be more striking. One side focused on informing and clarifying, the other on performing and deflecting. This isn't just a clash of opinions. It's a demonstration of how political discourse can either illuminate reality or obscure it. Vigeland's time on the panel, though brief, was a masterclass in holding power accountable, yet it also highlighted the structural challenges progressive voices face in mainstream media. Too often, interruptions, narrative control, and performance overshadow facts, leaving viewers with more noise than clarity. Imagine how much stronger the conversation could be in a moderated, one-on-one debate where facts were the center of attention and theatrics were minimized. For viewers, this segment is a reminder of what real accountability looks like. It's not about feelings, smirks, or constant references to past administrations. It's about evidence, impact, and responsibility. Vigeland's clarity cuts through the spin, revealing the tangible effects of economic policy, the truth behind the headlines, and the difference between talking points and reality.